Good evening. It began nearly 2 years ago, January 24th, 2002 to be exact. It was 4 in the afternoon. Sherman Austin was asleep. Seemed like a normal day until reason was suddenly stripped from reality. 25 fully armed special agents surrounded Sherman's house. 2 of the agents met him at the door, showed him a warrant, and drug him outside. With shotguns and machine guns, they entered his house and went straight to his room. Once inside, they began ripping through his belongings, seizing his books, his political posters, and finally dismantling his computer, which was taken immediately to federal trucks that were parked outside and had all his information downloaded to government servers and were confiscated. And then they left. His room torn apart, and the life of his friends and his family turned upside down. They left, and he was charged with nothing. It began almost 2 years ago, but it was just the beginning. A month later in February, after his home was raided, Sherman drove 3,000 miles to New York to participate in a peaceful demonstration against the policies of the World Bank and the IMF. Standing in Columbus Circle as the march was beginning, he was again rushed, this time by 20 police officers, and arrested. He was jailed and interrogated without the presence of a lawyer for 30 hours. While inside, he was asked over and over again if he was a terrorist and if he belonged to terrorist organizations. He was released without being charged. It was almost 2 years ago, but it was just the beginning. While waiting for a ride 30 minutes after he was arrested without charge, thinking the worst was over, in the same courthouse where he was arrested and released, he was surrounded again. This time by 6 FBI agents and arrested. He was grabbed by his neck, thrown into a black SUV, and taken to a federal building where he was placed in a maximum security jail and held for 11 days. He was then taken out of prison in New York and taken to Oklahoma in a federal jail for 2 more days. At this point, you might be asking, what was his crime? Was he a murderer? Did he kill anybody? No. Or was it that he was a young black anarchist and an activist who refused to be silent? The website that the government has attempted to shut down is called raisethefist.com. It was a website that Sherman ran from his bedroom. It posted information about all kinds of topics, covered all kinds of issues dealing with everything from challenging racism and police brutality to giving a voice to those engaged in the movement to challenge corporate globalization. The site, raisethefist.com, RAISETHAFIST.com, one word, also functioned as a host server, providing links to the sites of others. One of those sites, not authored by Sherman, contained information about explosives. Yet it was Sherman, after 2 years of harassment, upending the lives of his family, who was finally charged with distribution of material related to explosives with the intent to use them. He was charged and sentenced for a year in federal penitentiary for having a link to a site which he himself did not author or personally endorsed, containing information that could be found anywhere. I mean anywhere. It could be found in libraries, it could be found in bookstores, it could be found on internet book distributors. You could find it on Amazon.com. In fact, several years ago, I found a little cartoon that I found interesting. The first Rage Against the Machine t-shirt that was ever put out had a cartoon with instructions in Spanish on how to make a Molotov cocktail. Looking back, it was somewhat of a silly provocation, but the interesting thing about it was that it was authored by the CIA. These cartoons were used in the training of an unconstitutional, illegal terrorist army known as the Contras, who were responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of innocent people. Thank you. Tens of thousands of innocent Nicaraguan civilians as the U.S. government, in violation of the highest forms of international law, attempted to seize control of the resources of a sovereign country. A country, by the way, which may never recover from the destruction imposed upon it. I mention this only as a glaring example of the level of hypocrisy that not only runs right through Sherman's case, but is also weaving its way into the fabric of our everyday lives. It's an example of this vicious and repressive political climate set into motion by the Bush administration in the aftermath of September 11th. A climate in which the right-wing violence of the state, for example, the illegal and unjust bombing of occupation of Iraq, is sanctioned in the name of building democracy, while simultaneously they destroy it right here. It is in this climate where blind obedience and buying things are equated with patriotism, when being a Muslim is to be considered a suspect.
That's fucking right.
And being a young, black, free-thinking, rebellious, righteous anarchist is equated with being a violent criminal. All of this, of course, doesn't speak to the unjust suffering imposed upon this family. The fear, the harassment, the humiliation, the intimidation, the longing, and the loss. The pain which I'm sure that no words can describe. But it brings up one of the reasons that brought us here, to give our support, our love, our solidarity, to help give them the strength and the courage to continue to fight and bring some justice home for Sherman. The second and equally important reason is to let this fucking government know that they are not going to silence Sherman and keep his case in isolation. The government's case against him is so weak, they thought they could railroad him so long as it was kept from public view. Well, the fact that we're here tonight is proof that they have failed. Word travels fast, and with some diligence and some struggle, justice can't be far behind. I'm going to finish by